from the last video. And we're going to talk about this in terms of big T and little t trauma. Big T trauma being those traumas that meet Criterion A diagnosis, that Criterion A, and little t that may not be. So let's talk a little bit about Adam Frankel before we do so. Adam Frankel is or was a speechwriter for Barack Obama, President Obama. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors. His mother had a history of mental illness and depression, of a variety of symptoms that also seem to have affected him. And he says that we cannot fully grasp the horror of the Holocaust is a blessing, one that our ancestors who experienced it would surely have wished for us. It's also in a way a curse, clearing the way for deniers to claim it never happened and allowing the rest of us to grow complacent, to entertain the possibility, even for a passing moment, that everything we have, all of our rights, all of our freedoms, are somehow entitled to us, that they cannot vanish in an instant. So what he's saying is that denial and dismissal are purposeful. They serve the person who is denying and dismissing. It makes them feel safe, even if maybe safety isn't necessarily the right thing to feel in a situation. The problem is it poorly serves the survivor, or Adam Frankel in this situation. And this is part of what we need to be thinking about here. How do we keep ourselves safe while supporting the survivors in our lives? So trauma can be difficult to identify. And that's certainly something that Adam Frankel described. So some people may say, I don't know if my experience qualifies as trauma. People go through a whole lot worse. Why is she calling that traumatic? I've been through it. It wasn't so bad. Or everything is a trauma these days. What happened to resilience? Now, if we go back to Larson and Pasilla from the last video, one of the things that they said is some events may cause significant distress, but not PTSD, and vice versa. That they may cause PTSD, but not significant distress. So let's look at a couple of examples. In this one, Shea was at work when the call came in that there was a bomb hidden in her school building. She and her kindergarten students were first told to shelter in place, cowering under desks in a barricaded classroom, not knowing if the bomb was in her classroom. Shaya had to keep her students calm as her entire body was tensed, waiting for that fatal boom. Eventually, they were escorted out of the building to shelter in an outbuilding across the street while a bomb squad swept the building. Does it matter that the threat was a hoax? Would this be traumatic for the teacher? And if so, why? Would this be traumatic for the students? Again, if so, why would it be? Or here's another example. This is Madeline. We'll talk about her several times this semester. She says, I lost my mother to cancer when I was in middle school. When I think back to that time, of course, there was so much sadness around losing my mom, but there were so many other losses. My friends started distancing themselves from me as though cancer or losing a mom was contagious. My dad buried himself in his work. Partially, he had to because the business had been neglected as my mom got sicker and sicker. and partially because it made him feel less hopeless. When I think back on those years, it's the overwhelming loneliness, losing my friends, becoming a social pariah that were truly traumatic. Losing my mom wasn't really the trauma. So think about what factors led to Madeline's mother's death being traumatic. Was it the death, or was there something else going on? And so, what is it that we could have done that would have made her experience less traumatic? Now, one of the things you should be thinking about this semester is remembering the way that children perceive the world and that how they perceive it may be different than how we perceive it. Remember that children often feel like the moon follows them as they're walking around town. They may believe that they caused their parents to divorce or caused mom to be depressed or dad to drink, and that they should have done something different. And that's a piece that we need to be aware of as we're working with people, thinking about what is it that is putting them at risk or not. Um, so let's look at 9/11 and some of the life disruptions and mental health disorders that children were reported to have 6 months later. Again, we're thinking about odds ratios. So larger numbers mean more problems, and unusually large numbers, we're seeing these asterisks. So 3 asterisks means a p less than 0.001, 1 in 1,000 times just by chance. And we're looking at 4 different classes of disorders: post-traumatic stress disorder, other anxiety disorders, major depressive disorder, and conduct disorder. And you see that we're going to be focusing here, and that some problems, family relocation, school closure, school relocations, don't really seem to have significant problems or impact on mental health. So I don't think we see any asterisks in any of these 3 categories. On the other hand, if we're looking at restrictions of travel or family job loss, which may have more pervasive impact on a child and family functioning, we're seeing a lot of differences in terms of diagnosis of PTSD or other anxiety disorders, major depressive disorder, or conduct disorder. And part of what I want you to do is think about why. And you might want to go back and think about Madeline. What made her mother's death feel traumatic to her? Or more traumatic or less traumatic across, particular situations. So as we're thinking about what trauma is, we're thinking about it as an experience that's too big for your brain to make sense of, and that can make you doubt your ability, either physical or psychological, to survive. It can make you feel unsafe, insecure, hypervigilant, and can make you doubt your abilities to understand this world and to cope or live within it. Now, trauma can't be easily categorized. It's both about what didn't happen for you and what did. So with Madeline, both the relationships with her mother and the disrupted relationships with her father and her friends and their parents. You know, if we're looking at the last research that we were talking about in terms of 9/11, that as families lost, you know, restricted their travel, that probably impacted their relationships with other kinds of things, with other family members, for example, the kind of support, the sort of across time feeling of being insecure, and how that may have impacted what or their experience of the world. Now, as we're talking about trauma, make sure that you're not engaging in trauma poker. You know, we're not talking about whose hand is worse. Is having a mother die better or worse than surviving a faked bombing? So again, it's not the identifiable trauma or traumatic event, but what happened or didn't happen, and also how we reacted and what kinds of survival behaviors became encoded in us. Did we withdraw and avoid? One of the things we should be thinking about this semester is that avoidance tends to create greater problems rather than lesser problems. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll see you in the next set of videos for the third unit. Take care. Bye-bye.